Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with something a little bit different. I have never done a review of a power cable before, and to be honest, I was a little bit hesitant. Hi-Fi Audio offered to loan me this cable for review. It's the Nova power cable, and didn't really think that there was a reason I would need something like this. I mean, if I was running high-powered speaker amps, sure, a heavy gauge cable might be just what I need. I used to have a 300 watt per channel Macintosh speaker amp that would draw about 1400 watts and actually make a 14 gauge power cable hot running it at full power. I actually used to DJ with it at times and run it for hours on end. But I don't have that anymore, so right now all I'm running is headphone amps and the standard 8 gauge or 18 gauge power cable that comes with just about every amp or every component made these days. Probably puts out plenty of power or can supply plenty of power for any headphone amp, no matter how big or powerful it is. So I thought, well, why would I need a cable like this, and would it give any benefits? And the only thing I could think of, and the reason I did decide to do this review, is possible shielding of interference from other wires that are nearby. Because to be honest, my cables are a mess. I am switching amps and DACs and components every couple days, and I don't organize my cables. I don't get them in any sort of nice order at all. They're just a big mess, and my power cable's running right through the middle of connector cables and digital cables, and other power cables are all crisscrossed in a mess. And I thought, well, a cable with good shielding could possibly reduce interference from other component or other cables. So I decided I would give it a try. And so, once again, I don't really see the reason for a heavy gauge power cable on anything but a huge speaker amp, but I tried to go into this open-minded, and I know there's a lot of debates about cables, whether they make a difference or not. So I'm going to tell you what I came up with. So I'll tell you about this first. It's from Hi-Fi Audio, and this is the Nova power cable. And this was loaned to me by Hi-Fi Audio for review, and this currently sells for $169 US. This cable is 1.8 meters long. It is, according to Hi-Fi, made of heavy gauge conductors of OFHC copper. Okay, it says heavy gauge. I couldn't find anywhere on their website where it actually told what gauge it is. But this is a very heavy cable. I mean, I would guess this is at least 12 gauge, if not heavier. I'm not sure. So anyway, this uses 5 conductors, and it runs 2 hot wires, 2 neutrals, and 1 ground up the middle. It has a covering of polymer matrix and 2 dielectric delineators, which are basically hollow tubes running through it to space out the wires. And according to Hi-Fi, they are arranged in a geometrically balanced configuration. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but anyway, on one end you've got your conventional plug for your wall outlet, and then on the other end you've got a conventional IEC connector, which is what pretty much every headphone amp uses, unless it uses an external power supply and has a DC connection. But anyway, so the big question was, how do I test this? And I figured the ideal setup would be if I had one source running into 2 identical amps and had 2 identical headphones, and then plugged in 1 amp with this cable and then the other amp with a conventional cable. And that's what I did compare this to, just a standard 18 gauge cable that comes with everything, and these cost about $10, if even that. I think you can get them for about $6. But anyway, that's what I compared it to. And the ideal testing conditions, and I'm sure companies that design cables do this, I'm sure they have two identical systems set up next to each other, both running the same source into both, and have two identical headphones or two identical sets of speakers, whatever, and they can switch back and forth and instantly compare the two. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have two identical headphone amps or two identical headphones to do that. So that means I have to use one amp, which means I need to plug it one cable in, listen to it, then turn everything off, switch cables, turn everything back on, and I've got a couple minutes, like 5 minutes in between. And most people, their memory of how something sounds isn't going to survive the 5 minutes. So the best way I could come up with is I decided to do a noise test, a background noise test, to see if this cable made a difference, if it was shielding out any interference coming from any of my other cables, the huge mess of cables that this is running through. So what I did is I got out my noise testing headphones, which this is what I test every amp with. This is the Sony MDR V700, about a 20-year-old set of DJ headphones, but these things are super, super sensitive, more sensitive than most IEMs or earbuds. And if there is noise in an amp, if there's any kind of background noise, you will hear it with these headphones. So this is what I test with. So what I did is I used my Audio GD Master 9 headphone amp, which is my reference amp, has been for a while. And I used my CD player as a source, and to test the noise level, I use this headphone, not one of my more expensive, harder to drive headphones, because I'm not going to hear any noise with those. Not out of this amp. This amp is pretty quiet. So what I did is I paused my CD player and I put the amp to high gain, and I listened, and first I did it with the stock cable, which would be like this. I did it with the stock cable, and with these headphones, turned the volume up on the amp, and like I said, the CD player was paused, and I did this with two different DACs to make sure the noise wasn't coming from the DAC. One DAC was the Audio GD R8, R2R DAC, and the other was the topping D70S DAC. So I repeated this experiment with two different DACs. So what I did is I put the CD player on pause, put the amp onto high gain, and turned the volume up until I started hearing a little bit of hiss. Okay, well, with the stock cable, the volume knob, and the volume on that amp goes from 0 to 99. So with the stock cable, I started hearing a little bit of hiss, and this would be with the R8 DAC. At about 45 on the volume knob, just started picking up a slight background hiss. And so I was at about 45 and started picking up a little bit of hiss, and switched cables over to the Nova power cable from iFi, and it did make a slight difference. I had to turn the volume up to about 50 before I started hearing that same slight hiss. Keep in mind, though, that this headphone is so sensitive that on high gain, the way I was testing this, normal listening level for this headphone is like 8 or 10 on the volume knob. So this is way beyond normal listening. I mean, there is no way you could listen to this headphone with the volume on 45 or 50. You'd go deaf within minutes. So anyway, but there was a slight difference, and this was with the R8 DAC. I had to hit 45 on the volume knob with the stock cable to pick up a little bit of hiss, and I had to hit 50 with the Nova cable. Then I switched over to the topping deck, and the topping deck actually is a little bit quieter than the R8. It's a pretty much perfect measuring deck, so that means a little bit of that noise was coming from the deck. But anyway, with the topping deck, I was at 50 on the volume knob when I started hearing a little bit of hiss with the stock cable, and switching over to the Nova cable, I was at about 55. So it was basically about 5 clicks on the volume knob was the difference. And so I'm not claiming there was a lot of difference, but the amp, the background noise was slightly quieter with the Nova cable. So I don't know if that means that it was blocking out interference from other cables better than the stock cable. I'm not sure why the difference, but I repeated this test 3 times and came up with the same results 3 times. Okay, but like I said, you know, these volumes are far above any normal listening, and with normal headphones, even sensitive headphones, like say the Grotto SR80E or the Philips SPH 9500, the Kennerton Magni, the LSA HP2, those are very sensitive headphones. I don't hear any hiss with this amp at anywhere close to normal listening volumes with those. So so it does make a difference, but the question is it an audible difference because it's at volumes that I would never listen to? The other thing I did notice was with this headphone, it is so sensitive that with the once again the gain on high, I do notice a slight hum no matter where the volume control is. All the way down to 0, there is a slight hum in the background that I pick up with these headphones. And so that's with the stock cable. I switched over to the Supernova, and there was a slight reduction in that hum. I'd say maybe a 20% reduction. But once again, this is, using a headphone that is as sensitive as IEMs. I normally wouldn't use a Master 9 to listen to IEMs or something like that. So, once again, the question. Without a doubt, from my test, the cable did make a slight difference. It did reduce the background a slight amount. But it was at volumes that were far above what I'd normally listen to. So did it make an audible difference? Did I hear a difference? Normal listening at normal levels with the headphones I usually use, harder to drive headphones, I don't hear a difference. I'm not saying that there isn't a difference. I'm just saying I don't notice a difference, but like I said, I can't switch back and forth between 2 systems and check instantly. Is the background possibly blacker? Maybe. I'm not sure. It was hard for me to tell. Like I said, with the headphones I normally listen to, a lot of planar magnetic headphones, they're harder to drive. I don't pick up any hiss, any background hum. So, like I said, to me, it doesn't make a difference in my normal listening, but, and I mentioned this in my last video, my hearing's probably limited to about 15,000 hertz. Is there something above that this cable is helping? I don't know. So I'm not saying it's not going to help you, it's not going to make an audible difference to you. I'm just saying I didn't hear a difference. But, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I found out. So anyway, I did think of, a reasonable reason to have this, though. I am also reviewing this. This is the IFI power station. Okay, this is a power conditioner that has active noise canceling in it. And according to the website, this thing's wired internally with 13 gauge wires. So this thing's going to handle some pretty heavy current. Okay, if you start plugging big amps into this, like speaker amps or whatever, the cable that comes with it is your typical 18 gauge cable. And I would say this cable is going to limit the amount of power you can run through this if you want to plug in some, large speaker amps or something. So that would be one place I would suggest this, is to use this. This will plug right into the power station, and now you've got a heavy gauge power cord, and you can run, you should be able to plug in just about anything but the biggest speaker amps into this, or a surround sound amp, or whatever it is, your big 4K TV, everything else. So if you're wanting to use this, and a cable like this is going to limit the amount of power you can run through it, might not be a bad idea to go with something like this. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Like I said, it does seem to make a small difference. Whether you're actually going to hear that difference or not at normal listening levels, I don't know. Personally, I didn't hear a difference, but I'm not saying for sure that it's not there. So anyway, I did want to point out though that the cable is extremely cool looking. So if you're worried about how your system looks and want to impress your friends, it is a very cool looking cable, and it does look a lot more impressive than the stock cable. Or, if you're pushing your system to the absolute limit and a couple percent of difference, you might get a slight difference. And if that slight difference is worth a few extra bucks, then hey, run right out and get one of these. But anyway, it sounded great. I've had this hooked up to my M9 for a month. It sounds great, but I can't tell you if it sounds any different than it does with the stock cable. So I'm just going to leave it at that and leave the decision up to you. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you are all welcome to join us over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. We are up to 13.6 thousand members, a little over 13,600 right now. So I'd like to see you all over there, and once again, thanks for watching my video.